This is the Free Heel Life Podcast, episode number 55. I'm your host, Josh Madsen, coming at you from the Free Heel Life Shop in Salt Lake City, Utah. And welcome back, my friends. It's Monday, and I've got a new episode for you today. But before we hop into that, a couple quick newsroom and notes. Our programming is in full swing. We've got tons of content coming out on all our different platforms. We're trying to make sure that we cover all of our bases and that you guys are seeing it wherever you may be looking. So if you aren't either on our Instagram, our Facebook, or the YouTube channel, please don't miss out. Make sure you follow us on those platforms or subscribe on our YouTube channel. YouTube's a great way because you're getting all the videos and they're kind of all in one zone. So I would encourage you to do that. On that note, a new episode of Dosty's View is dropping tomorrow. And Craig Dosty, if you're not familiar with him, is one of the OG backcountry telemark guys in the world. I feel very fortunate that he's on our team and really helping us break down gear for all you gear nerds out there, really helping us break down new equipment, old stuff, and giving us a little insight into what's new in that realm. On Wednesdays, we've got the Lowdown with Taylor Johnson. He is our Free Heel Life shop manager. I'm sure you're familiar with him, and he's picking different topics throughout the month and dropping knowledge on that. Feel very fortunate again to have him on our team. He's done a great job helping run the shop, run our crew, and his knowledge runs deep for such a young lad. So if you've met him in the shop or talked to him online, he knows what he's talking about. So that's a great way to kind of see more of a vision of what's going in the shop, what's coming through, getting that sort of thing. And there's plenty more coming out. All your stoke videos, stoke photos, you name it. So thanks for checking that out. Today's guest grew up in Vail, Colorado. He was the son of two backcountry ski guides for the 10th Mountain Division hut system and first put on a pair of telemark skis when he was in 6th grade. As a young person, he was involved with ski racing in Vail along with various backcountry excursions with his parents, where his love for the outdoors grew. Following his time in college in the Pacific Northwest, he returned to Colorado for an internship at the Colorado Rocky Mountain School, otherwise known as CRMS, in Carbondale, Colorado. He later became a full-time teacher at CRMS and the head coach of the CRMS Telemark Team. His unique team approach to telemark skiing has produced some of the best competitive telemark skiers and athletes in the past 2 decades, including, but not limited to, Max Mancini, Nick Devore, Jake Sakson, Cody Smith, and many more. He is currently the science department chair and part of the science faculty at CRMS and continues to coach young telemark skiers through the CRMS program in the winter. Please welcome my good friend, Kayo Ogilby. All right, Kayo, welcome to the Free Heel Life Podcast, my brother. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to talking telemark with you, and always appreciative how much you keep doing for the sport. So thanks for keeping the torch alive, and excited to talk. Always,
dude. No, it's like I was telling you before we got on. I mean, you're one of those guys, like when I started this podcast, I was like, oh, I got to talk to Kayo. I'm like, you're a lot of people's telemark hero, dude, whether you like it or not. So I think,
thanks.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, honestly, just to hop right into it, you and I have a long history, but I'm if you could just, I kind of just want to, give a little background on, like, where Well, I guess like where are you from originally? I guess I don't even know some of this stuff. So let's go back to the beginning, and tell me a little bit about where you're from and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I grew up in Vail. I grew up ski racing for Ski Club Vail. My parents ended up in Vail in the late 60s, and they had been from Illinois, and my dad followed my mom out to Colorado, and she went to CU, and they ended up in Vail right when the place was first getting built. And they got lucky and bought one of the old homestead cabins in Vail, one of two. The roof had fallen in, and they got it and the 2 acres that it was built on for $100. And then my dad loved to restore old houses, so they restored it. So I got to grow up in an old homestead cabin in Vail.
Wow, that's crazy. So that was like right at the beginning when they're like literally, was the resort there already?
It was just barely there. It literally was the very beginning.
Wow.
Yeah. So, they were part of the, just the conglomerate of young people that showed up, with a tool belt and were willing to, just kind of figure it out and building Vail in the early days.
Wow. That's so crazy. I know it's hard to even imagine it now because anybody who's been to Vail probably doesn't think of it as like homestead buildings and like
right
exactly. 'Cause now it's like totally opposite, like it's pretty ritzy and whatnot. Were your parents skiers in Illinois then?
They very little, like many Illinois people, they did have a couple hills nearby and they had learned to ski, but they really truly learned in Vail and in Colorado. And that actually kind of led towards my interest in telemark, is that when I was in middle school and high school, they were both backcountry guides for Paragon Guides, leading hut trips in the 10th Mountain Division hut system, and of course had learned to telemark to do that. And so they had gotten equipment and were taking clinics all through that time. And so I first put on my mom's telemark skis when I was in 6th grade at a ski race of my sister's that we were watching at Powderhorn. And so that was kind of the beginning and the intrigue.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that they were. So you kind of grew up, around like backcountry skiing, guiding. Were you doing hut trips like with the parents ever when you were a younger kid?
Yes, for sure. Yeah. They were big outdoor enthusiasts. I feel so lucky. They instilled in me the passion I have today for the outdoors, and a big reason why I ended up at CRMS. I wanted to find a place once I knew I wanted to teach, that had that kind of skill set that I could hopefully offer. And they dragged us out all the time, and I'm super thankful for that.
Yeah. And then you were and I guess I didn't really realize that. So you were ski racing like when you were younger. Was that like a big part of you growing up, was ski racing?
It was. Yeah. It's interesting looking back at it now, after having become a teacher and a coach. I ski raced for Ski Club Vail. I started in 6th grade, 5th grade maybe. I had been playing hockey before that, and then my parents said all I wanted to do was fight, so they pulled me out of hockey. I loved hockey.
You really? You were a fighter in hockey,
right?
Oh,
yeah. They did not like the person I was becoming, so they pulled me out and they put me into Ski Club Vail, and I was pissed, and it was, so found myself in the ski racing world, and looking back at it, I never loved ski racing. I had loved hockey. I never fell in love with ski racing, but looking back at it, a couple of things were happening there that would, I think, become pretty significant in teaching and coaching. And one of them was, I'm so thankful for that foundation that it provided me as a skier, and as a coach. I think it set the foundation that was so translatable to big mountain skiing and coaching years later. kind of funny story in that regard is Seth Morrison was in the same program. We were the same age and went through it together. And I don't think he ever loved ski racing either. But when I was 30, I went up to High North ski camp, the free ride camp at Whistler, both to kind of, it was to figure out this free ride stuff on my own and learn how to coach it. And Seth Morrison was one of the coaches up there. And we hadn't seen each other since high school. And so it was fun to get caught up. But he was at that point in his career where he was adding the free ride tricks to his big mountain skiing. And so he was excited to take the group. He would cycle each group up through. We'd hike up above the park and find some little big mountain line, whatever was available in the summer glacier at Whistler. And he would do a little clinic. And so when it was my day to go up there with him, and again, I'm with mostly little kids here that are taking this camp, and we get up to the top and he starts talking through the exact same coaching progression that he and I had learned in Ski Club Vail. And I just smiled because I use the same stuff. So much of what I learned as a ski racer, I apply to coaching today. And so it was cool to see. And I would say I would attribute a lot of, obviously Seth has tremendous ability, but so much of the foundation he took from ski racing and applied it to the big mountain world, I think is a big part of what made him such a dynamic and incredible skier. So yeah, so thankful for that ski racing foundation. The other aspect, as I look back at ski racing and Ski Club Vail at the time, and maybe it's changed, wasn't quite as positive. And that was that it was a pretty individual endeavor. I never felt there were never adults there that were also saying, hey, this is the type of team I want this to be, or this is the type of individual I want you to be. These are the type of people we want you to be. And so it felt to, I couldn't put my finger on it at that time, but looking back at it now, it was so skiing specific and perhaps lacked the kind of character development and team atmosphere. So that was a little bit of a journey into, the ski racing foundation.
No, that's really interesting. I mean, so was there like a specific method that you kind of like look back and recognize that they were using that, like you recognized in Seth's stuff, or what? Yeah. Like, can you delve into that a little bit? I'm kind of curious, like what that is.
Yeah. So I would say my main go-to thing, and then that every kid that's come through the CRMS Telemark team has had to endure and try to master is hop turns. And I've always, that was something that was drilled into us in Ski Club Vail, and I took and have carried forward ever since. And so, and again, and Seth was having his group do that up on this little couloir on the glacier. And for what that does for your upper body position, developing single pole plant, angulation, and converting that to telemark skiing, of being able to take off and land on 2 feet equally, and what if you can get hop turns down, you can ski the steepest terrain possible. And again, it provides that foundation, that technique. And I guess my favorite story with that is Jake Sakson being an example of someone who latched onto that lesson and then took it to the next level. So he's like, okay, I'm going to learn how to do hop turns. And he did. And then he's like, I'm going to learn how to do hop turns without ski poles. And he did. And then he's like, I'm going to learn how to do hop turns down any terrain, anywhere. He would find the kind of ridiculous stuff at Aspen Highlands, the cliffy, treed out stuff. And as a result, I think, became his technical skiing became just a stunning technical skier. And I think maybe skied one of the hardest big mountain lines I've ever seen anyone ski anywhere, in Alaska. What was that? Probably 2006 or 8 or something like that. Mm. So that is one of the big pieces that I got from ski racing and Ski Club Vail. Those kind of things that translated obviously beautiful to ski racing, but directly to the big mountain stage too.
That's interesting, because I wouldn't have thought hop turns, and I think it's because as skis evolved into wider, like when the skis were a lot straighter, hop turns were kind of like commonplace. But it's kind of it's kind of interesting. Like now you don't even really hear that. Like that would have been the last thing that I would have thought you brought up. That's cool. I mean, do you feel like I get, it totally makes sense, like what you're saying. I'm curious, like, as skis changed, did it really, do you think getting away from those types of dynamics in teaching actually have been a bad thing for people then, because they're not learning how to do that stuff because the skis do so much for them?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I guess it's become one of those things that I've become even more adamant of teaching as it has evolved, for very much the same reasons that you're saying, is that part of what I say now as we teach it is that I say it's going to be rare that you're actually doing hop turns in a competition or in a situation. But what this skill set gives you, and is translatable to ripping giant, big super G turns, or just skiing in any conditions, this is going to give you the foundation, and the upper body placement and technique, and the lower body, it all comes together. And I think the other piece is, regardless of the equipment, I want our athletes to leave this team with an ability to ski both ends of the spectrum, to be able to open things up and rip 40 to 60 mile per hour super G turns, but then to be able to shut it down and deal with a really tight couloir, and demonstrate speed control in a competition, or just when they're skiing, and thus show that they're dynamic masters of the full spectrum of skiing. I think most skiers get locked into kind of a medium radius turn, and I want to see our skiers have this dynamic quiver of what kind of turn and what kind of speed they can deal with, and thus be able to deal with any type of terrain. So going back to your original thought, even though the equipment has evolved, I think there's still situations where I'd love to see them end up in gnarly, sharky terrain, or funky frozen spring conditions, and still find beauty and still be able to deal with it.
This is so cool listening to you talk about this, dude, because I know all the skiers you've taught, and I'm like, oh, this makes so much more sense. You've done a great job. I mean, that's pretty incredible. I think a lot of coaches, I don't think, probably focus on that too, is like kind of the well-roundedness of tackling a piece of a line or different terrain or features. Yeah, like you said, it's like people become specialists in like this one little area of how they make a telemark turn, and they don't really know how to put all the puzzle pieces together when there's just a mountain in front of them. So
yes, yeah, no, and I love that notion, right? Is how can you use the mountain as your canvas and be playful with the mountain regardless of the conditions you show up that day, so that you're not walking away saying that was a shitty day, but rather you found that ability to express yourself, and walk away with with a good day.
That's I love that. Well, okay, so just backing up a little bit. So like you grew up in Vail, you obviously started telemarking at a young age because of your parents. Did you end up going to school like for teaching, like somewhere in Colorado, or what? Where did you go after high school then? So let's see. So my kind of connecting it there to the telemark journey a little bit. By my junior year in high school, we have these friends in Vail that were from Norway, and they started the first mountaineering shops in Vail, Gore Range Mountain Works.
And I ended up working for them, during breaks and all that kind of stuff, and there was just phenomenal telemarketers there, and so some great models. So I bought my first tele setup my junior year there, and started playing with telemark in my free time in between training and ski races my senior year. Then went to the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington. Super funky alternative college, no grades, design your own major, right at the base of the Olympic Peninsula. And actually kind of took a break from skiing for the most part because I was obsessed with whitewater kayaking at the time. And so when the rainy season hit in Washington and the rivers came up, we just chased rivers every weekend throughout the whole winter and spring. And I think one of the amazing things up there is there's different water all the time. And so I'd say of the 4 years that I was up there, I only skied up there maybe 10 times, brought my stuff out there. And that was kind of the first point where I was no longer ski racing and thus mostly chasing telemark when I was skiing, and then skied when we came back for breaks in Vail. And then ended up getting a internship at CRMS. Actually, I knew I had called a soccer coach at CRMS named A.O. Forbes, a soccer coach and an absolutely brilliant master teacher at CRMS, and he's still here. I had met him playing soccer when I was a senior in high school, and called him my sophomore year in college because I realized I wanted to teach. And I said, hey, do you think I could get an internship at CRMS? And he said, yes, let's make it happen. And so I knew that I was going to be at CRMS by the end of my sophomore year in college. And so got an internship right out of college at CRMS. And then my wife and I went back to grad school. CRMS has a great sabbatical program. And we went back to grad school in 2004 and 2005. And that's where I got my master's in teaching secondary science education, and we ended up at Columbia, New York City. So it was my first time to New York City ever, and it was magnificent. It was a wild ride, and just a great time in our lives to step aside. That was right when Jack Tolan was on the team. I think that was his senior year. So left CRMS and the team at that point, and went back and got some more education.
So so when you that kind of puts it in a better timeline for me, because I must have met you probably around 2002. When did you start the CRMS? And I forgot to mention Colorado Rocky Mountain School. So it's
yes, thanks.
No, that's all good. I forget too. But the CRMS Telemark Team, when did that idea come? Like, is that something you created, or was it already there and you kind of took over it?
It was there a couple years before I got there, and kind of a fun, I guess, full circle story is that, like a lot of programs at CRMS have started out of student interest. We now have a glass blowing program that was a student's idea that he took it to a teacher and they started it, and then it took off. And the Telemark Team was the same thing. So in 1994-95, a group of students went to Peter Mueller, who was running the outdoor program at the time, who's now the principal at Basalt High School. And they said, we want to start a competitive telemark team. And he was like, all right, let's do it. And so that was 94, 95. And my sister was one of those students. So she was at CRMS at the time.
Wow.
And so she ended up on the first telemark team, and so did Lorenzo Worcester. Lorenzo was mostly a Nordic skier, but then would ski with the telemark team when in between races. And so then when I showed up in 95, 96, the team was, I guess, 3 years old, and Peter Mueller was still running it. And so that first year, I mostly just skied with them whenever I could. They had two coaches, they were set, and I would go ski with them. And then the next year, the other coach and teacher moved on, and I coached it with Peter. So that would have been 96, 97. And then Peter moved on in 98, 99. And so I think I took over the program in 98, 99.
Wow. So did you crisscross with Lorenzo?
I did not. No, I knew him because my sister mostly. That's how I got to know him initially. Just informally through that, just because when I would come home from breaks from college, and just meeting some of my sister's friends. No, I think he graduated the year before I came.
And so so like that late 90s.
Somewhere. Or he was probably, I guess he's probably 94, 95 or something like that. Maybe even 93, 94. No, it must have been, I think the team started probably his senior year, 94, 95.
Wow. I didn't realize it started that early. That's cool. I knew Lorenzo was there, but I was always trying to figure out where you guys intersected. Fast forward to kind of that early 2000s, I guess so you must, so like early 2000s, you must have gotten to know Bones at some point.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So tell me about that. Cause like I've mentioned Josh Bones Murphy on here before. For any of you movie watchers, he's like the guy who made 16 millimeter films, which were all the unparalleled movies. But probably a little known fact with you is your CRMS crew. I can think of Robbie McMahon and Max Mancini. And I think that was Unparalleled 1 or 2. One of those first ones, right?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how that all came about.
Yeah, so Josh called and had gotten wind of the program and called and said, "Hey, I'm coming through." This was actually after the ski season had ended. It was the spring, and can I come out and film with you guys? And I remember he came through. He had a bunch of skis from K2. We went down into our ski room that he needed to get mounted up, and he put I think both those guys on those skis. I think that was that may have even been, I think that was pre-pieced pipe. I think we were drilling.
I remember Robbie and Max had, in a couple of those clips, had the original Solomon.
And then there's the 1080s.
The 1080s.
Right?
I'm thinking the 10.
Oh man,
isn't that funny? So the yellow ones.
That was one of my favorite moments of skiing of my life. Of when the 1080 came out. I mean, what a shot of adrenaline in the arm that gave the whole ski world. But going and buying those the moment they came out and mounting telly bindings on them, and suddenly having that whole door open up. That was right in that same time period. And so I'm so glad you mentioned that, because by the time Josh found us, K2 had the piece pipe, a twin tip, right? They had a twin tip Telemark ski, and Josh had just gotten, it was their first twin tip Telemark ski, and Josh had just gotten an order of them, and he hadn't even mounted them yet. So when the first thing he showed up at CRMS, he's like, "We got to mount these skis." And so we went down to the ski room, and he had already developed his own little formula for mounting twin tips. And that was where I use that formula to this day when I mount skis with the team, of putting the binding a little farther forward than the traditional mount to accommodate for the tail, both when you're skiing switch, but also just now that the tail is looking for where it came off the snow. I'll never forget that, kind of just playing around with that with Josh. Mounted up a bunch of those and went up to Buttermilk. The mountain was closed, and we just hiked up. And this was right in, just in that exciting time of landing switch and doing 540s and mute grab 360s and just, oh God, it was it was glorious. This whole new slew of things to do and integrate into the telemark experience. And that first, the stuff that the CRMS boys ended up in that first year was shot at the base of Buttermilk there.
That is so crazy to think about, because really nothing had been seen like that. I mean, if you
right,
and you were there. I mean, you were like, I mean, I remember seeing videos of your guys and then meeting them later, and still to this day, I look back and I'm like, that must have been so cool, because these kids are like high school kids, and they're, I mean, you didn't grab your skis before that. You didn't even land backwards before that.
Right.
And especially on Telemark gear. So
that's right. Exactly. That combination, going back to that notion where, growing up for me, I had always loved skiing, but I had wrestled with, not loving ski racing. And though there was moments like that where I look back and I remember the absolute joy of just, you couldn't sleep at night. You went home and you had this, you're trying to be like, okay, the mute grab, like how am I going to do that? Right. You were so excited. And those are some of those moments when I look back and I think that's when I just that love of the sport and excitement of the sport and rejuvenation of it. And then, yes, how do you do switch telly turns, and how do you land switch? The first 50 times trying to land switch on Telemark skis. Max Mancini was the door opener for me. I'll never forget. I'd been trying to do 180s, one way, and he's like, no, you just got to pop up and keep your head looking where you're landing, and land enough on your heels that you're not going to fall forward. And so, yeah, those little exciting moments of that stuff were glorious.
Yeah. And those guys growing up there too, because guys like Max and Robbie, I mean, it's like they also were, I don't know if they knew guys like Peter Olenek and that at that point.
My God, they were yes, same, they did, and very close friends. So sorry, I cut you off. But
no. I was just thinking, because the Olenics, they later on are like X Games and I think maybe Olympics. I don't even remember. But
yeah. Meg shot for the Olympics in Russia. Just missed the team right because that was the first free ride. That was the first free ride ski Olympics, right? I think.
Yep.
And she didn't. Yeah, just missed the team.
Yeah. I mean, so that, you go back to that time. Here's these young kids on tele skis, but they're also sort of mixing, they're friends with all these alpine skiers that are also learning how to slide rails and how to grab their skis and all the different grabs and land and switch. And oh man, that's so cool to think about, because it must have been like this weird little petri dish of like unknowns and people just coming up with tricks all the time,
Yes. Yeah. I'll never, I think another one of the pieces that have just burned into my memory and is getting the 1080s, and they came with the DVD of the Canadian Air Force, JP Auclair and JF Cousin.
Yep.
And just seeing that stuff, what they were doing, really, that was my first time I really saw it. And just like, okay, here we go. Let's try to figure out how to do this on Telemark skis.
That's so funny, because I was telling some guys at the shop about that. I had the VHS tape of that, and what was crazy is like I had been out of the country for a couple years at that point, and I came back to like that, and I was like, what happened? I'm like, my skis are still like 198s with like pit bull bindings on them, and all of a sudden I'm like, what is this going on? And people don't realize it was like the Canadian Air Force with Mike Douglas, JF Cousin, and those guys, and it was like a how-to video. It was like, here's how you do a Japan grab, right,
yes,
because no one knew what anything was called,
Yeah, exactly.
That's so funny. Well, so obviously those guys get going. I mean, we were talking, you guys filmed with Bones. That was kind of in that unparalleled section, and then I think the first time I ever met you was, if I remember right, was Jackson Hole during the USTSA Big Mountain Comp, and we were just talking about this on a few podcasts back. Jeff Wright had put this whole series together, and I showed up to that. I was kind of new. I had tried racing for a few years, but I remember someone being like, "Hey, this is this guy who's coaching his team, and you were competing," which was even. I mean, and if I remember right, I think Nick Devore was at that one because I feel
yes, he was.
But he was like 14, right, or something.
He was.
Yeah.
That was that competition, man. There was something about that event that just, a few things happened at that event. One was, and I forget who that was that tried the line in finals. That tried that essentially unskiable line down that cliff face off a tongue at the top.
They got injured.
They got injured.
Yeah, that was Scott.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
But Nick came to CRMS as a sophomore, and then and was there for about a year and a half, and was on the Telemark team, and then the school didn't work out for him, and so he was back at Aspen High School, and so we showed up at that event, and it was great. It was so great to see him. We hadn't seen each other, and so he and I ended up scouting together, and found this line. I remember we get to it, and you can't access it from the top. You can't ski to it because you've got to drop into this cliff and ski this hanging snowfield. And so we end up below the bottom cliff, and it's somewhere between 60 and 80 foot cliff. And we look at each other and we were like, "Do you think it goes?" And we're like, yeah, we're doing this, we're probing around in the apron at the bottom. We're like, yeah, I think this goes. So he and I both skied this line together. He tried to stomp it on his feet, which was what you should do in a big mountain line, but the landing was a little flat. So he knocked himself out. And then came back to, and then skied to the bottom. And I was the next skier after him, and didn't know what had happened. And I threw my legs out right at off that cliff and landed the hip check, which is about the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life. But got lucky, and it was deep powder, and was able to pop right back up. And so it worked well for me. But yeah, that's the first time I remember meeting you as well. I think that was it.
Yeah, no, that's so fun. I still remember, I'm pretty sure that line you're talking about was like lookers left if I'm looking up the venue. And I just remember, it's so funny because I was probably 2002 or 3, somewhere in there.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And I just remember being like, wait, the coach is skiing and there's this like 14-year-old kid hucking 60-foot cliffs. I'm like, what? Definitely out of place. So
yeah. Well, yeah, Nick and I went on to, and you helped us with the advertising to start start Portillo Big Mountain Telemark Camp together. And so I really am thankful so much for the time I got to coach him, but then to work together as colleagues for years. And we both look back at that moment, and be like, I think every big mountain skier has that moment where you push the boundaries beyond, where it's safe, and then you end up kind of revising your approach and rethinking how you're going to be a big mountain skier, so that you don't kill yourself. And we both look back at that moment of really glad we did it. It was a glorious moment, but also no, I don't want any of my athletes doing that kind of line, and I will never ski that kind of line again. And Nick, and it kind of, that, and the competitions shaped Nick's approach too, which is, how can I be incredibly dynamic, fast, powerful, and without taking the risk factor to a place, on smaller stuff? How can I act like a ninja and bounce off these smaller hits and these smaller cliffs and ski beautifully? And so, yeah, we look back at that and laugh, for sure.
Well, yeah, man, as we're talking about that, I was just trying to think of because part of the reason I was so excited to talk to you is so many people I've met along the way in the last 20 years, whether it's shooting video or writing articles, competitions, like there is this direct line back to you, dude. I mean, it's so interesting to me how many people, and I'm just thinking of all the guys, Nick Devore, Jake Sakson, Max Mancini, guys that, like you said, Jack Tolan, Cody Smith, Luke Lubchenko. I mean, I could go on and on. All these fantastic people that came through your program. And they're all like ninjas, dude. Like, I mean, when you watch these guys ski, I used to call it like this, there's like this CRMS style, something about how you teach these guys. There's like this common thread across all of them. Like they're so, and you know what it is still upper body, man. Like none of your guys, the way they ski, I don't know what it is, but they just, it's incredible control all the time. I don't know if that's like me just seeing it that way or if that's something you taught them, but
no, that's so neat to hear and that goes back to the hop turns conversation we were having. And I think it goes back to what's always appealed to me about beautiful skiers is this absolutely clean, quiet upper body and this dynamic piston, 4-wheel drive suspension stuff going on in the lower body. And it goes back to, kind of moments in my life when I think back when I had switched from ski racing, or was starting to play with telemark. And one of my immediate thoughts was, I want to go fast. And I remember my dad, when I was first messing around with it, my dad saying, slow down, like rein it in. You're going to kill yourself. You're going way too fast for the equipment. And you're trying to ski the speeds on alpines that you are on telemark. And so there was this desire to do that, to go fast, but find a style that allowed you to do it where you didn't explode, and it was clean and it was beautiful. And so that translated into what I aspired to coach and create, which is clean upper body and a taller telemark stance that gave you the suspension and the pistons in your lower body to be able to shock absorb and ski fast. And so I ended up not promoting a deep stance because I felt like that, once you're down deep, you don't have anywhere else to go. But if you're up taller, you've got shock absorption. And I think Nick Devore probably became the person that took that, Nick and Jake, to the, I love that full circle of having this idea and then these guys coming back and then me, watching them ski and be like, oh my God, okay, so there's where the possibilities lie. Mm-hmm. So yes, I echo that. Yeah. So again, I need to hear you say that because those are definitely the pieces that I aspire and were always in the back of my mind coaching of cleanliness, upper body cleanliness, and dynamic lower body.
I like that idea of a piston. I guess, yeah, it's fun to hear your side. I don't even think we've ever talked about this
No, I don't think we have. No, it's
yeah, no, it's interesting because like just hearing you talk about the methodology of like having a taller upper body and like a piston, that makes so much more sense, and yeah, like you said, like Jake, that era of Jake, Nick, Will Cardamone, Chris Erickson. Mm-hmm. I don't know if those were Will and Chris part of your program or were they?
No, they weren't. No, Will was grew up in Aspen and went to Aspen High School. And so fun, close net circle and lots of friends in common, but nope, had found his telemark path independent of us.
Yeah. I mean, outside of Paul Kimbrough, I would say that or including Paul, I mean, I often think that is probably up to this point the pinnacle or best group of big mountain telemark skiers like ever, maybe. Like when I watch those videos from that kind of mid 2000s. I mean, it's probably like around maybe in 2011, somewhere in there. I don't know. Like, have you ever seen anyone before or after that ski that technically and fast through that kind of terrain?
I think that there's two videos that stick out to me. There's one of Nick Devore skiing that line. God, what year? That's 2007, I think, in one of the powder whores. That was, I think, in Alaska, top to bottom, huge big mountain line that to me redefined kind of big mountain skiing on tellies. And then Jake's line, the speed that Jake was skiing, probably 3 years later in powder whores. Yes, I love those, stick out so much to me. Before, I would say Dylan Crossman, it was in that space, and then we've got the Cherney boys coming up, and they, so I think what's exciting about Orion Cherney is that he has followed in their footsteps. So let's see, we could say Nick was the first person to get a top 10 finish on telemark skis in a big, world big mountain comp on the world tour, and then Jake on the podium, and then Orion Cherney has become the first person to win internet. Let's see, was it nationals? It was I think it was beyond internationals. It was 2 years ago, on the IFSA circuit, and win against an alpine field. So I think we've got the Cherneys to keep an eye on. And Ryan already, what he's doing is really exciting.
That's awesome. With the IFSA stuff, I guess you're a great person to ask. I mean, I know we've tried having telemark competitions, and it seems like it's getting. I've always been a fan of. I like the idea of competing against each other. Alpine to telly. That's always cool. But I've always loved that idea of like telly to telly. But it seems like, I mean, honestly, having put on those events, it's getting incredibly difficult to financially put that stuff on. And once it's in, I'm just curious what your take is of it, because the junior fields, because there's an organization that can get young people there, that seems to work. But the ability to maintain at adult level, it doesn't seem as easy as it once was, like when you're talking 20 years ago. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would totally. It's what a roller coaster the maintaining big mountain events in the telemark world has been. So right now, after Targi disappeared, Nick Cherney got in touch with Taos and did it under the umbrella of the IFSA. And the first year it was just a junior comp, and that was kind of the trial. So that was 2 years ago, and it went well, and IFSA and Taos were up for it. And then last year they added an adult field, which was great. And it was small, again, kind of rebuilding. But I think having the IFSA, what a gift it's been, because of the umbrella of a big program that is really writing the book of how big mountain competitions can be done, and done well, and done safely. But then things like insurance and all of that stuff. And so the fact that the IFSA now also has a collegiate realm kind of opened the door to have an adult field in Taos. And so, mad props to Nick Cherney and his energy to get that event going, and to Taos and to the IFSA, and hopefully that provides that doorway that we can continue to go through. We would have been back there this winter had it not been for COVID, and so hopefully once COVID blows through, we're back.
Yeah.
And whether that becomes a full series, who knows? But it does give. I totally agree with you. It's been a gift to go compete telemark against alpine skiers and have a venue. The IFSA has given us that, but there's nothing that equals a telemark competition for that ability to compete against telemarkers, but for the community. I think to show up and be with that group of people and that small, tight-knit family community that is telemark, and is one of the aspects that I've always loved about it. I mean, I would leave Targi every year pretty much in tears, it meant that much to come back to see all these people that, it became, unfortunately, for a number of years, just a one time a year festival, but before that, the multiple times a year. So I agree with you. We need to keep fighting for telemark specific events and to have that space to just reunite and get together and be ridiculous and and see each other. Yeah.
No, and I think that is like it kind of almost became a forum. Like you said, it's like everyone just kind of missed each other, it always seemed like, and just I think especially as you got to the adult field, it seemed like people were just like, hey, I'm just glad to be around other telemark skiers and go skiing. And the athleticism, I was talking to Tim Shepard about this on a podcast not too long ago, and he was kind of that Jake Sakson era, but you'd see those guys show up and ski against each other, and it's just like, what?
Yes, right.
It was sort of like the proving ground once a year where everybody kind of got together and it really showed what was possible and how people were thinking in their approach to the mountains. And I always thought that was really cool.
Yeah, you walked away with this new, there's nothing like getting the best athletes in any discipline together, and then that osmotic seeing other styles or seeing exactly what you said, like, oh my gosh, I didn't ever even think of doing that or trying that or and so you walk away a better skier because suddenly you have this new set of ideas and you've integrated this visual experience of seeing these other people do it. And that's so important in anyone's learning curve, and to have that, you don't get that same opportunity at an alpine comp. You get the other intriguingly aspect of like, oh, I really like what that guy does. Now, how do I translate that to telly? But I agree, to see these guys doing it on telly and just fueling off this energy and possibilities, huge. And watching my athletes take a jump after each one of those competitions, just ripping afterwards with everybody and them, it's just picking up the pace of their skiing and pushing their boundaries. And then they come home and they're so excited to get back out there and work on that thing that they just saw happen. And it's a nice circular machine, a critical circular machine in terms of the motivation and excitement. We need those telecoms.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I need to get Nick on here and talk to him. I kind of want to pick his brain about that. And but one thing that came to my mind too, you brought up earlier, and it hadn't really occurred to me, that your experience with ski racing probably was very different in terms of a team aspect that you've integrated into CRMS. And it never really occurred to me until you said that, like, that is really the difference. Like, everyone that I've ever met from the CRMS team, it really is like a true team dynamic, team sport kind of, I guess you could say. But like, what's been the most beneficial part of that for you as a coach, instilling that teamwork aspect, even though it's kind of an individual situation when you're out, maybe competing by yourself. You're not obviously passing a ball around or something like that.
Yeah. No, I think that everything you've just said and asked, to me, I think is the most important and intriguing aspect of coaching and teaching. And that is that whatever we're teaching and whatever we're coaching is just a tool to aspire to create warmth and good human beings that are going to move on and do good in this world. And I think if we're coaching and we're teaching and we miss that aspect, then we are truly missing the most beautiful leverage and tool we have at our disposal. And so, I had mentioned that I had felt like I hadn't recognized it when I was young, but in Ski Club Vail, but I saw it done masterfully through a soccer coach, my soccer coach, had that eye towards creating passion for what's happening, passion for soccer, and instilling a desire to be a team and to be good people at the same time. And so I love the tension between, some with a team sport, soccer, football, where it's really intuitive. Like, we've got to operate as a team, right? We're going to fail if we don't. But then you take these individual sports where, what does it mean to be out there pursuing excellence in your individual endeavor and your individual competition run, but still have an eye beyond yourself, and to be thinking always about the other people around you. And so whether that comes in the form of, I don't want any athlete on my team to be standing on the top of a big mountain line, which frankly is about the most terrifying thing you're going to do in your life, and feeling alone, right? I want them to know I'm scared. I'm more scared right now than I've ever been, but my whole team is at the bottom down there, and they've got me, and I'm going to have them. And so that's one piece of just developing this lens, this ability to see beyond ourselves. I think, to me, that's a big part of just the game of life. Like, how do I not get caught up in my own crap, and how can I see others? And then I guess the other thing that appeals to me with any sport, but telemark lends itself so beautifully to this, is that the quest for excellence and beauty in telemarking is really hard. And I think that's part of what draws us all to it, is it's the harder path in the skiing world. But because of that, the possibility of aesthetic beauty and beauty in it, I think, exceeds, at least for me personally, what is out there in other skiing, riding disciplines. And the notion of taking that quest for beauty and excellence and passion in that discipline and translating it to the rest of our lives is, to me, that other aspect of not getting so caught up in one thing that we can't then say, oh, okay, what's it look like to pursue this level of beauty in the other aspects of my life? Telemark is such a great analog to me to that, because of the possibility of beauty and because of the challenge of reining it all in and making all your different parts work together. That's appealing, and kind of taking those two things and thus, looking out for each other, and thinking about using that as an analog to seek excellence in life and to do good in the world. And so, I get equally excited. It's always exciting to see these athletes that continue in the telemark world and do wonderful things, but as excited for these students that move on to something else, but do, find that same path and do good on the planet and do wonderful things and continue to practice that approach and that mindfulness. So I don't know if that answered that question, but that's kind of, I guess, what goes through my head constantly, of telemark. We can't just be telemarkers. We can't just be skiers. We've got to, we live in a messy world that needs us so badly, and we've got to see beyond ourselves. And that just starts with each other. And then we blow that out to our communities and to our democracy and to our world. And hopefully, I think telemark's just has a lot of seeds and roots to be good people.
That was beautiful, man. That was really cool. No, I mean, that's cool. Just to hear kind of your approach to, it's almost like I kind of got lost in what you were saying, almost like it didn't have much to do with telemark at all in a lot of ways, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and I think that's it, right? I think that's it. Exactly.
Well, and it's funny because I've always said, like, I think what draws at least in my experience, what's all the great people I've met like you over the years, it's almost like the stuff that draws us to telemark is an art or a type of skiing or however you want to look at it. I've always said it's almost more of a personality choice, and and I think there's something that really speaks to your the individual in a different way, like, and you can see it in people that don't get it. Like I've always said, like, especially someone like me, people are like, how do you grow telemark skiing and how do you do this? And I'm like, I hate to say it, but in a lot of cases, like if you say like what you just said to someone and it doesn't resonate, it's like, it's really hard to get that person to probably go to the watering hole and drink, so to speak,
Yeah.
And, but that's cool, man. That's really a beautiful, I'm really touched just to even think, like, to hear that and understand it the way that you're approaching it, because I think, like you've had coaches that have, all the best experiences I've had in team sports. I think I had coaches like you that were thinking, I came out of it with a way bigger of an experience in the sport, itself.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's got to be extremely satisfying for you, man. I mean, have you stayed in touch with a lot of your students that have left, after being in the telemark program?
Yeah. Yes and no. I'm pretty terrible at staying in touch.
I put you on the spot.
Right? And for that reason, I love, I tend to operate more of like just those moments when you do get to reconnect, like now reconnecting with you on the phone or seeing each other at an event, or I love that aspect. I wish I was a little better at, and I am actually trying to work on kind of a practice in my life where I find that time every day to just reach out and touch base. And so, like anything in life, you end up staying in touch with more folks than others, and your paths cross more often than others. And I'm always so thankful for those that do. I actually, Cody Smith lives just down the road, and we bump into each other frequently. And so. Let's see. So the question. Sorry, I may have gotten lost.
No,
in
that's
the
okay.
question that was. Was it keeping in touch, or was it?
I guess just in general, like I just think of like you've probably affected so many people you don't even realize. Like I guess just is it cool to you to ever like see people down the road and just like I guess you kind of mentioned that just
absolutely.
seeing their accomplishments and maybe how being on the team affected them or whatnot.
Yeah. They absolutely. Yeah, and love and cherish any opportunity to whether it's a quick connection or say hello or running back into each other. It just always reminds me of just how much those years of working with those people on the Telemark team, what they meant and what that community has meant to me is tremendous. And so I've actually started a project recently with group photos, both from CRMS trips and Telemark teams. And I'm going back and archiving all of them and putting them up in my classroom. A little bit out of that notion of that you speak to, of the challenge of staying in touch with everyone. But I have always been intrigued with the notion of the Day of the Dead, the Mexican tradition, and this has to do with people after they passed, of putting them on the I forget the name of the thing you build in the Day of the Dead with all your ancestors, and you have their pictures so that you, as you see them, as long as you keep having their pictures there, they stay alive in the spirit world. But it allows you just to continually reconnect. And so I have kind of started taking that idea for these pictures, the team pictures and group pictures and stuff of, and thankfully everyone's still alive. But to just be able to, on a daily basis, look over at a picture and a person and have those memories come up and think about them. And so that's been one way of trying to continue to stay connected and thinking about folks, even though I might not be seeing them directly.
I love that, man. Well, I can't tell you how grateful I am to have had this conversation with you today, man. Super insightful. And, like I said, I think you're one of those guys if it wasn't for you, I know you don't want to hear this, but it's like, you've touched so many people in the telemark world, and I think we're all grateful for it. So I want to say thank you from all of us, and I think, I've made a lot of great friends that came through your program, and I know they're all not only amazing skiers, but amazing people, and it makes sense why, just by the way that you taught them. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Josh, and thank you, for all that you've done and continue to do to keep this tribe alive and connected, and the torch going, and yeah, so right back at you, and so thankful for all that you've done, and again, just the warmth of the telemark community over the last 20, whatever, I guess at this point. I don't even know if I want to say how many years we're talking.
It keeps going. We're in the decade. We're talking decades now.
Right. Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I'm sure somewhere down the road, even talking to you, I've got more names and things that just continue the deep rabbit hole journey of like people that I'm like, oh, I got to find out more about him. So I'm sure I'll be calling you down the road, and we'll find more stuff to dig up. But
excellent. Look forward to it when it happens.
Yeah, brother. Well, have a great winter, and thanks for coming on the podcast, man.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All
man.
right, take care.
See ya. Bye. Kayo is such an amazing person, and like I was saying, it's almost like I get lost in it's like we're not talking about telemark all of a sudden, and I absolutely just love that about people that I've met in our community along the way, and it's sometimes you meet these people in life that just they influence you, and you see how they influence other people, and I think Kayo's hands down one of those people where he's not like one of those characters in the forefront, maybe as a coach, if you know him, but I know how many amazing, like I said, amazing telemark skiers, technically amazing telemark skiers I've met that were touched by his teaching methods, but I'll tell you, all of those people are incredible folks that he made better humans for sure. So love that. Great conversation. I learned a lot. It taught me a lot about Kayo that I didn't know, and I've known him for a long time. So I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation as well, and that just stokes me out that finally I could get him on here and kind of dig a little deeper into the Colorado Rocky Mountain School telemark program and some of the history, the team aspect that Kayo has promoted in his program. And I agree. I think that, by having great people experience things like that, it helps our world become a better place. So, good stuff. That was a great one. How you can support us, as always, by listening to the podcast, and we appreciate that. If you so desire, you can always make an additional donation of your choice. PayPal.me/FreeHillLife. We always want to help you at our telemark shop here in Salt Lake City. You can shop online. We ship worldwide. Go to freeheellife.com. You can always reach out to our people at the shop, customer service at freeheellife.com. They've got the answers to your questions, and they're always there to serve you and make sure that you're psyched on what you're getting and you know how the gear works. Telemarkskier.com for all your articles, gear reviews, and whatnot. And you can always reach out to me directly at podcast@freeheellife.com. Thank you so much for listening, my friends, my Telemark family. Another great week is ahead. We'll be back next Monday with another episode and news and notes on the Telemark world. But until then, spread Telemark always.